Goedenavond allemaal. Aflevering 37. Ik ben het tegenwoordig nakijken voor we starten, dus ik weet het heel zeker. Vandaag gaan we nog eens met een onafhankelijke bottelaar spreken. En dit is wel eigenlijk een heel interessante, gewoon alleen omwille van het feit van eigenlijk de geschiedenis. Hij draagt ook wel een zeer belangrijke naam in de whiskywereld. Ik vraag me dan nog af wat de naam betekent voor hem, gezien dat toch wel een enorme last ook meebrengt, vermoed ik dan. Dus ik ben zeer benieuwd naar vanavond. Ik ga alvast een tipje van de sluier. Ik ben zelf iets al aan het drinken en ik ben zo lief geweest om alvast een van mijn geliefkozen, en je ziet het niet, mijn excuses, geliefkozen distilleerde rijen te selecteren. En het is een vette 11 jaar oud. Een van zijn eerste bottelingen, dus ik kijk er enorm hard naar dit gesprek. Dus, people, please welcome Alistair. Hi, Alistair.
Good evening. How are you?
You're having a sip before we started, so I presume you needed it. Our chat before the show, it was like, okay, I need this one.
It's always a good idea to have a dram before you do anything.
Yeah, of course. Alistair, let's start with the thing everybody's always talking about, your name. Your name is Alistair, of course. And it's not that usual for us Belgian guys, at least. But I think everybody in the whiskey scene knows your last name is because it's Walker.
Yeah.
And what does it mean? For those few people who don't know what Walker mean in the whiskey world, can you tell us about it?
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, I know obviously you're referring to my dad, Billy, who I spent. That I have to say that photograph was taken in South Africa in 2010, and we were on our way to the World Cup final, which was between Spain and the Netherlands. It was actually a terrible game, but it was a good experience. But yeah, so my dad is Billy, who is quite well known in whiskey. I mean, he's been a little understatement. Obviously, he's currently running Glenallachie Distillery, but before that, and I worked with him for 12 years when we had Benriach, Glendronach, and Glenglassaugh. And I worked with my dad before that for 6 years at Burn Stewart Distillers as well. And my dad's been in the industry even before that. He was with he started with Allied, Ballantyne's, then he was at Inverhouse Distillers for quite a long time. Then Burn Stewart, and Benriach, and now with Glenallachie. But it's funny, the name Walker obviously is also synonymous with Johnny Walker, which we have no connection. But I remember going into a bar somewhere in Atlanta a few years ago when I was working for Benriach, and the sales rep who I was with introduced me to the bar manager as Mr. Walker. And the guy got all excited and he said, "Oh, we have your red label, your black label, your gold label, your blue." I said, "No, that's a different guy. It's not me." So yeah, so Billy's obviously been about for a long time in the whiskey industry.
Yeah, I promise you, we don't need to talk a lot about him, but of course he's your dad, and I presume he's very important for you being in the whiskey industry. At least at the start. Was it easy for you growing up and working in the whiskey industry and in the early days, of course, being a son of Billy? Or was the pressure like, for example, Johan Cruyff, the famous footballer, his son Jordi Cruyff, he had a big amount of pressure on him because his dad was one of the greatest footballers. So I can imagine when your dad is that famous in the industry, it's not always that easy.
I've never really felt any extra pressure. I mean, it can be quite strange working together with your dad, because it's never exactly the same relationship as a normal employee to boss relationship. So that's always a little bit more complicated. But I mean, it's funny. When we worked at Burn Stewart, I'm not sure that my dad was as famous then as he probably is now, because we were very much like a blended whiskey company, and single malt hadn't really taken off at that point. Although we had two distilleries, we had Deanston and Tobermory, but single malt just wasn't anything like it is today.
Yeah.
And I think, although my dad was quite well known amongst his peers in the industry because he was a good blender, but he didn't really become that well known amongst consumers until he bought Benriach and started the whole project with Benriach. So I think it was really only around about that time that his name started to become more prominent. And I was there at the same time, so we were kind of doing the journey together, you know.
Mm-hmm. As a young lad.
Well, young-ish.
Yeah, you sent me some photos and you mentioned yourself. I was really young at that time, so just as an example, for example, this one.
Look at that hair. That's like a lockdown haircut. Nice parting right in the middle, you know. That must have been like 2007, 2008, something like that. When I could actually still fit into my kilt at that point as well. So
long ago.
It's a bit tight now. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. What was your job at Benriach? What was your daily routine? So
Benriach, when we started with Benriach, the company only employed about 12 people. 6 of those would have been working up at the distillery, and then we had another 6 down in the office. Some interesting. That's a friend from high school that's just posted there. So there was 6 of us in the office, and at the time I was basically looking after sales and marketing, and my dad did a little bit of sales, but it was really just the 2 of us that were selling. And eventually we brought in a guy called James Cowan, who you might have met at some point. He's a good guy, and he came in to take half of the sales side of the business. But Benriach was brilliant fun, especially the first 2 or 3 years when we were selling small quantities of product, but it was so exciting and it was enjoyable, and every time. You know, this was back in 2004, and single malt. I don't think single malt as the category it is now really started to take off until about maybe 2006 or 2007. So back in 2004, it wasn't that easy, but it was great fun, and we were playing about with different types of cask, and every time we sold even a small quantity or opened up a new market, it was like a victory, and we had all this fantastic whiskey that we'd inherited with the distillery, so it was just great fun, and we got to be like really adventurous and sort of pioneering, and it was just enjoyable, and it was a real team effort because there was only a few of us. So you kind of did a bit of everything. You might have been packing up samples, or you were trying to build a website, or you were going out to do a whiskey festival somewhere. But you did everything. You know, absolutely everything. It was great.
And did you guys expect at that point you would be that rewarding? You would win so many rewards for best whiskey and stuff like that, or was it like,
no?
Let's see what it gives.
There was never like a long-term plan as to what was going to happen. It was just Billy always loved what he called playing with the whiskey. So he was the guy that was in charge of what's happening at the distillery, what type of casks are we going to use, are we going to do a peated expression, you know, how much stock are we going to put in this type of wood, how much is going to go in that type of wood. So he would go and do that, and then he would come back and say, so I've got these Madeira casks, and I've got these dark rum casks. What can we do with those? Shall we sell those? But there was never, we had no idea, because you could never have pictured the category for single malt being what it's like today. It looked nothing like that back in sort of 2004 to 2006. And I mean, if you'd told me all the things that have happened were going to happen, I wouldn't believe you. Everything that happened in terms of pricing, that, you know, I never thought you could sell a whiskey for more than £300 or £400 a bottle. And I said we never ever set the thing up with a plan to sell it to a big American multinational company. That was never on the agenda. But sometimes, you know, you get up on a Monday morning and you don't know what's going to happen that day, and suddenly you get a phone call from somebody saying that Brown-Forman wants to come and talk to you about buying your business, and you're like, what? So
yeah, I can imagine that's a strange feeling. But you worked for Benriach, and of course you were connected with Glendronach and Glenglassaugh as well. Yeah. Did you work for all three of them, or did you mostly work for Benriach?
No. It was. I mean, all three distilleries were kind of. We didn't have different people for different brands. It was all like one team effort behind the whole package, if you like. I would say, if I'm being honest, that I think, I mean, Benriach was obviously the first one, and then Glendronach came along in 2010, and buying Glendronach was probably the most important thing that we did, because I think it changed the kind of the nature of what we were doing. Glendronach as a brand has got so much more potential than a Benriach or a Glenglassaugh, and it was also this fantastic whiskey, and I think that moved us on to another level. But we never, we never gave any more priority towards Glendronach over Benriach. They were probably about equal. I would say that when we bought Glenglassaugh, I think we probably my dad would probably disagree with this, but I think that we were so busy already at that point that it was difficult to bring in a third distillery and give it as much attention as it probably needed. And I still think that Glenglassaugh is it's still like an undiscovered gem that has got so much potential, but it needs the attention and the time. And if somebody had that just as a standalone, and that was the only distillery that they had in their portfolio, they could really go for it. But it also had that problem where it had been closed for such a long time, so you didn't have access to the same profile of stock that you had at Benriach and at Glendronach. But I'm sure it will have its day at some point. It's in the future. It will definitely have its time in the spotlight.
Talking about the distilleries, obviously you won a lot of prizes. The team. If in the photos, this is one of the first, I think.
That was the first big one that we got excited about. So that's actually out in New York at Whisky Fest, and we won the Distillery of the Year. That would probably have been around maybe 2007 or 2008, and it was the first time that we had won such a big award, not for a particular whiskey, but for the whole distillery. So we get really excited about that one, and we won a similar award maybe a year or two later from Whisky magazine. That's the whiskey, the Malt Advocate Award there, the American one again. and that was quite a big moment. And there weren't. I don't think there were quite as many awards available at that time. That's the Whisky magazine. You probably recognise. There's Dave Broom, and there's Raymond Davidson from the guys that make the Glencairn glass, and I think that's Rob Allinson, who was the editor at Whisky magazine. That was a good one too. That was a really good one to win.
I can imagine. I presume it gives a great feeling standing over there, and you and your dad did such a good job at that point, and it was like, this is where we all do it for. This is not the thing where you started for, but this is It's
nice to get those awards. I think the Distillery of the Year awards are still quite a big thing. Mm-hmm. You know, when someone says, "Oh, I mean, I don't know how you pick the best distillery because everybody's doing good work. You know, maybe it was just our turn that year. I'm not sure."
Yeah. I, for myself, as a matter of fact, I was a big fan in the early, I think 2010. I'm not sure. It was the time when the 15-year-old dark rum and the Madeira finish and the 4 different kinds.
Yeah.
And I think you were one of the first who did something like that. All same age and all different cast finishes.
I mean, I know that Glenmorangie had been they'd done a couple of things with Madeira and Sauternes before that, but it wasn't quite as common as it is today. Those 4 that we had. So there was the port, the rum, the Madeira, and the Pedro Jimenez sherry. And as you said, they were all the same age. That was a brilliant range. I loved the dark rum finish. Was one of my favourite whiskies, and I wish I think I've got half a bottle.
I have a full bottle
somewhere here, but there's so many whiskies that we brought out that I thought would be there forever, and I didn't buy enough of them. And you can't. There's a lot of those that you just can't get them anymore. But you always look back in hindsight.
Yeah, and then at that point, the Americans came and bought the distilleries. So at that point, you were unemployed. Just to say, is that the point you started your own business, or you decided to start your own business?
It took about another year. I honestly, Gunther, when it was such a weird time because the deal to buy the 3 distilleries by Brown-Forman happened in, I think it was June 2016, but the actual process, we'd been speaking to them for about a full year before that, and we had to keep it all quiet because it was all confidential, and you couldn't. There was only a few people in the company that actually knew about it. So I'd been kind of living with this possibility for a year, but even probably only up until the last 2 or 3 months, I wasn't entirely convinced that it was going to happen, and I hadn't really been planning what I was going to do. And I still, I mean, after the deal went through in June, I stayed till November. I stayed for about 5 or 6 months, and then I left. I was always going to leave, and Billy was always going to leave, but he stayed a little bit longer. But I hadn't really thought about what to do next. Whereas my dad, you know, I kind of knew he was always going to go and try to find another distillery. But I was kind, and I could have joined the Glenallachie project. But the more I thought about it, I'd been at Benriach for 12 years, and I thought maybe this is kind of the moment in time where you decide to set up your own thing. And if I didn't do it then, I don't think I would have done it, because then I would have got involved with Glenallachie, and that would have just gone on for forever, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine. But then 2018 you started, and then Alistair Walker Whisky Company was born.
Mm-hmm.
And what's about the logo? The two leaves and the why?
Oh, that's you'd have to speak to my graphic designer. I think they are supposed to be barley, sprigs of barley. But we were going for a kind of retro sort of feel to the logo.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the most original name for a company, but my problem was that to start the business, I had to register the company with Companies House in the UK, and you need to have the name. So I thought, well, just go with that. Go with Alistair Walker Whisky Company, and then you can come up with the brand name later. But you need to get the name registered so you can go and get a bank account and speak to HMRC about all the paperwork that you're going to need to become
the administration. I get that.
Yeah.
And how did you came up with the name Infrequent Flyers?
Well, it's a bit of a there's a few different answers, but I had about 100 names that I kept writing names down, and one of the biggest challenges was, I mean, I'm an independent bottler, okay, so it's all about single casks and distilleries and the origin and where they come from. Now, the best name that any independent bottler has is Provenance by Douglas Lang, because Provenance says everything about what independent bottlers do. It's about where the whiskey comes from, the origin, the distillery home. And if you try to come up with a name like that today, all of these good names for whiskey, somebody else has. They're taken. They're already. So it's so difficult. So I thought, why not just go for something that's nothing to do with whiskey, and then nobody else will have it. And Infrequent Flyers, I mean, what we're talking about there are casks from distilleries that are less travelled, that you don't see quite as often. Now, don't get me wrong. If someone comes along and says to me, there's a Springbank or there's a Lafroy cask or there's an Ardbeg, and
you will not say no.
The price makes sense, I won't say no. But I knew when I started this that the way the market is just now, it was going to be more difficult to get access to the really famous whiskey names. So the plan was to actually look at some of the lesser known distilleries. You know, we were talking off air about Fettercairn.
Yeah.
You know, Fettercairn is not a particularly famous distillery, but that doesn't mean you cannot go there and get some good casks of whiskey. And the job of independent bottlers really is to kind of take some of these not so famous distilleries and actually put a little bit of attention on them and let people try those whiskies. So that's what Infrequent Flyers kind of relates to.
And then you decided to do the airplanes on the labels. I really love it. It gives that old style again, just like the logo. Is there something behind the colors? Is it region based or something? Or just
No. Do you know, Gunther? I actually thought about doing that, but the problem is that what you'll end up with is a lot of Speyside and a lot of Highland. So you'll end up with lots of whiskies that are in the same coloured label, and you won't get as many Islas, and obviously you won't get many Campbelltowns, and you won't get many Lowlands. So we just decided to go for a random colour, and it just alternates. You know, we've got 10 colours now. There was 6 at the start, and now there's 10, and we just rotate them. So the colours don't mean anything, but all we wanted was if you put them all on a shelf, it's going to be quite bright and distinctive.
I have to say, when you see it like this is the first batch, if I'm right. it looks great.
No, that's batch number 3, but that's we brought in 4 new colours for that batch. So the mocha, the pink, the purple, and the orange, they were all new.
Okay, talking about batch 4, that's the new one. This is out of this time.
Just launching this week.
Okay, so it's completely new. Is this anything people need to know and have to buy? Of course, you want them to buy them all. Is there something special along?
Well, I mean, no, these that going to the picture you have there. That's batch 3. That was the one that came out in the summertime. So those ones they're already on the market.
Okay.
Batch 4, literally just bottled about 2 weeks ago. Well, actually, it was bottled in August, but we had to get the labels applied, which always takes another 4 weeks. So this one I've got here, this is actually one of the new whiskies. This is a 14-year-old Blair Athol that's been finished in a Sauterne cask. And this one I'm loving. It's like sort of apple and raisin strudel. There's loads of stewed sultanas, and I'm trying to remember the name. It's very fruity. Really sweet, rich, intense. A little bit of demerara sugar. But this one, you know, when you sit down, you pick these casks, and then a few months later you get them bottled. But even in that time, they change a little bit. So I never write the tasting notes until I've actually got the final bottled version of the product. And I was writing these tasting notes last week, and I was, wow, this is so nice. Yeah. So we've got this. There's 6 casks in this batch. We've got the Blair Athol. There's an 11-year-old Glenrothes, which has been in a PX sherry puncheon. That's our obligatory sherry bomb. We try and have one sherry cask in each batch. We've got a secret Isla, a secret Speyside. There's a Deanston that's been finished in a rye cask. And one that I really like, which is a very, I mean, just a 10-year-old Altmore from a refill barrel, but it's one of the first casks that I bought back in 2018. So it was only 8 years old then, but even at that time, I thought this is a really nice whiskey. It's just a classic style Speyside, and it's not been finished. It's the original cask. So what you're getting there is the true distillery character without any interference from different types of wood. And I knew I was going to bottle it when it got to 10 years old. I just wanted to give it a couple more years. And it's a delicious little whiskey. And
how do you select your whiskies? You get on the market and buy it, and you have your own warehouse, or do you do it all by yourself, or do you have someone with you? Because I can imagine it's not easy when you do the selection all by yourself.
No, honestly, it's a one man operation. But so you know, when you're buying casks, sometimes in the ideal situation, if you're buying directly from distilleries, you'll sample the casks first. But there are other occasions when you might go out to the market, if you like. There's a lot of whiskey brokers out there.
Yeah.
And if you buy from brokers, you might not actually get the chance to sample the cask first. So you have to take a little bit of a leap of faith. Do you like that distillery style traditionally? Do you think it's going to be a good cask? But you'll never know. And there's been many occasions when sometimes you have to buy parcels and just say, right, I'm going to take a risk. And once you get your hands in the whiskey, you can decide what you want to do with it. I mean, one of the things that I'll quite often do, say if we're buying casks, we'll try and buy a parcel of casks from the same distillery. So you might be talking about, let's say the Deanston, for example. You might buy 6 casks of Deanston that are all the sibling casks. They're all the same consecutive cask numbers, same vintage. And then you have a look and you think, okay, I really like this one and I really like this one. So I'm going to put them out in the original cask. But the other ones, there's nothing wrong with them, but I want variety. So I'm going to put that one in a PX hogshead, and I'm going to put that one in a virgin oak barrel. And then you can start to bring some differentiation in by your re-rack program. But it's always good if you can take a couple of the original casks and keep them back so that you're bringing out some single cask bottlings that are going to reflect the distillery character, and it's not just about the wood. So we try and do that with a lot of the things that we're bottling.
When you say you want to make sure the distillery character is there, does it work like that always, or do you get, I think this will work and it gives a great taste, and okay, it's different than the other. For example, Deanston, this is not just a regular Deanston. It goes completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to reflect, what you might expect from the distillery. The main thing is that as a bottler, you have to be happy with the quality of the whiskey. You it's almost like you have to like it first.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is that not everybody else likes what you like, but the only way you can pick a cask is to decide if you think it's good, and then you release it. Not everybody is going to agree with my choices, but as long as most people do, then you should be okay.
True that. You sent me this photo, and I'm curious. Is this your warehouse?
I wish. No, that's the filling store up at Glenallachie, but those casks were all mine, because basically the very first re-rack program that we did, we were bringing the casks in from another location up to Glenallachie, because I do all of my re-rackings are done up at Glenallachie. So I work with, like, for example, if I want to get access to some port casks or some sherry casks or some Madeira casks or virgin oak, I'll do that through Billy. So he can get me the empty casks much more easily than I can. And then we actually they have the ability to transfer the liquid from one cask to another. And so I actually end up storing most of my casks up at Glenallachie. But that particular picture was taken, that was back in around about Easter time. I think it was last year. And we brought in about 50 casks, and they were from about maybe 12 different distilleries, and they were all getting re-racked. So Richard, who's the distillery manager up at Glenallachie, said, look, we'll just put these casks straight into the filling room, because they're going to go straight from that cask into all these other casks. So that's why that photograph was taken. I don't have my own warehouse, although Billy says that I seem to think that I do. So.
Yeah. It's sometimes I think it's easy when you have a dad working in the industry as well. So I put them over here just for a month.
It can be quite helpful sometimes.
Yeah, up till that moment when he says, "Let me taste it, son. You have to do this completely different."
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think he's so busy with Glenallachie. I remember when I was picking the casks for the first batch, he came over to the office, and we went through about maybe 30 casks in one session over about two and a half hours. But after that, it's so difficult to get that time. So I just thought, you know what, from this point forward, I'm just going to do it all myself, and see how it goes.
And I think it works. I hope you're happy with it, but I'm a fan.
I mean, listen, it's great fun, and to be honest, I mean, Billy's quite good in that. If he will quite often phone me and say, "Look, we've got a really interesting package of casks coming in from maybe French wine casks, or it could be some
volunteering."
Julia, yeah. She's also far too busy to be getting involved with my tastings.
So, Juliet, are you too busy? This is time.
But Billy's good, because if he gets offered some interesting wood, like he got me some Chinkapin oak, he got me some rum casks. He'll pick up the phone and say, "Look, we're bringing in some of these. Do you want to take 5 of them, and you can go and do some more re-racks?" So it means that occasionally you get these opportunistic types of wood that crop up that I might not necessarily be that familiar with. But he'll sort of say, "Why don't you try this, or why don't you try that?" And so
you have some help. Never too busy for a program.
As long as it's unpaid, that's all that matters.
We're making deals here, so. Patrick's saying, would Billy be interested in adopting me? So actually he's asking, Alistair, do you want to have a brother? An ugly brother?
That's not the sort of question I expected to be asked. I think I'm a bit long in the tooth to be getting any new siblings at the age of 45.
Sorry, Patrick.
Sorry, Patrick.
So, how long are you working in the whiskey industry? For more or less 20 years?
Yeah, so I started in 1997 at Burn Stewart. And yeah, so there's been 1 or 2 years in between with no whiskey involvement, but yeah, about just over 20 years. So
and how does it work? Because when you were growing up, your father was working in the whiskey industry. Does he say, like, Alistair, you have to try this one? You're 12-year-old. It's time to use your nose.
No, it's when you're younger. I mean, I really didn't like whiskey so much when I was 17, 18 years old. You know what it's like. You go out to the pub and you're just drinking.
You want to have a beer.
You're drinking beers and more beers and more beers. But over time, I think everybody, their palate changes. But for me, it probably happened a little bit earlier, because I started working with Burn Stewart when I was like 22 years old. So suddenly you're working with whiskey. You start getting interested in whiskey. You start drinking whiskey at a younger age, whereas most of my friends who now drink whiskey probably didn't start getting interested in it till they were maybe like 30. So I definitely came to it earlier, but Billy was never said, you have to come and work in the whiskey industry, or just do what you want to do, sort of thing.
It just happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, but you're working in the industry for 20-year-old. What do you think what's your favorite whiskey up till now?
I mean, my go-to dram was always the 18-year-old Glendronach, the Allardyce. That's been my long-term favourite, and I have in the cupboard over there. There's about 4 or 5 cases of it, so quite a good supply. But there's other ones. I mean, I think Ben Nevis is a really nice whiskey. If you know, there's some really good bottlings of Ben Nevis out there. You know, Glenallich's good, Ben Riach's good. I think some of the stuff that Aaron have been doing lately, their 15-year-old and their bodega, really nice drams. Yeah.
But is there a whiskey when you see it, or when you remember it, it's like it was at that moment, for example, your wedding or the birth of your child? Is this something like that? Because the day before I had my wedding with my wife, of course, it was like this whiskey, and I always remember that whiskey, drinking that whiskey the night before. Do you have a whiskey like that?
Not really. I've never had like an epiphany moment with. I mean, there's some whiskies that I've really liked, but I've never had an experience like.
Yeah.
Maybe it's still to happen. Maybe.
Your first grandchild, for example.
Many
years.
That's a long time away.
Now I hope. No, but a lot of guests telling me it's like I always feel happy when I drink this whiskey because, for example, my dad used it, or it remembers me of my dad because he was drinking that kind of whiskey. So you don't have that kind of memory with a whiskey.
Not really. I mean, I've had some great moments with whiskey, but I couldn't specifically tell you which whiskies were involved in those great moments. I mean, I remember one of the nights I always remember, and it wasn't a particularly special night, but I remember being in Montana, a little town called Missoula in Montana, and we used to do these whiskey roadshows when I was working at Ben Riach, and we teamed up with Springbank and Duncan Taylor because we had the same importer, and so this night in Montana was the last night of the trip, and we'd finished all the work, and we'd gone back to this bar called the Rhinoceros, and it was, I mean, Montana's a beautiful place, big sky, you know, mountains, open countryside, and I think it must have been like September, and we were standing out the back because everybody was smoking cigars. And all of these guys who had been at the whiskey tasting were bringing out their bottles of, you know, old Macallans and Balvenis and Springbank. And it's a dark, beautiful sky, starry night, cigars, all these great whiskies. And I just thought this is these are the great moments that you get as being part of this industry. Now I can't specifically remember the whiskies, but I can remember people there.
Yeah. Okay. If you started your own business not so long ago, 2 years ago, of course, then COVID happened. I can imagine as a young firm, you don't want to have a COVID situation and being stuck in Scotland for, I think, for a couple of months at least. Does it work? Can you handle it?
I mean, I think whiskey's been quite lucky in that I think the small companies haven't been so badly affected by it. If, for example, if you're a big whiskey company, you might sell a lot of your whiskey through on-premise or airport shops. So you're not going to have that just now. No. But for smaller independent producers, you know, a lot of the sales are done online. People seem to be still buying, you know, single malts. There's a lot of tastings and, you know, these type of things where you're working over social media. So it's not been a damage. The biggest problem is we are very reliant upon third-party services like bottlers and label printers and warehouses. And if they close down because of COVID, then we're stuck, you know. And that's what happened in March when I was trying to bottle the third batch. We were just about there. We just had to get the labels onto the bottle, and then the lockdown hit, and the bottler had to close for like 6 or 7 weeks. So that just pushed everything.
Yeah.
Was delayed by like 2 months, and literally I had nothing to sell, and there was nothing to do. And obviously we would normally be going to whiskey festivals and doing tastings, and so all those type of things are gone for the moment, but hopefully not too long before they come back.
Do you have any plans to visit another country or a fair in the near future?
I mean, everything that was in the diary has kind of disappeared. There's nothing on for this year, and normally September, October, November is the most. That's the big time for whiskey festivals. You know, in Brussels you would have Spirits in the Sky. We would have an event in Berlin. You've got one in the Netherlands, another one in Frankfurt. You've got, you know, the festivals in France, lots in the UK. But everything's been cancelled. Now, at this point, you don't know what next year is going to look like. But it'll be great to get back and actually see people face to face, you know?
Yeah, it's different. This is the good solution, and the online whiskey fairs is nice, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. Whiskey's such a sociable. It's interactive, and you know, when people go to the whiskey festivals, they go as a group. They meet their friends. They go to the pub before. They go to the pub after. You want to talk to people. You want to share a dram. It's not the same. It's definitely not the same.
Yeah. Do you think the situation now, and I don't mean COVID, because I more or less mean the social media, for example, will it be used when COVID is gone? Or do we get back to the original scene? And because personally, I think this will be part of the next year's solution for doing tastings and stuff like this.
I think there's going to be a mix between the two, because you know these things have developed out of necessity, but actually they're so easy to do. You know, for me, I'm not having to get on an airplane, and it's a couple of hours. You do a tasting. So I think there'll be a mixture between online and physical. But I mean, if you speak to, you were talking about Paul Dempsey earlier, who I think Paul goes to more whiskey festivals than anybody. But you know, for the guys in the trade, you know, it's a good opportunity for us to meet our colleagues from other companies, and we always go out for a few beers afterwards. So we kind of miss the social interaction with our peers as well. So I think when the opportunity is there to go back to whiskey festivals, the industry will have a big appetite for it.
Yeah, but will it get different in sales? Do you think you sell more when you have the live tastings?
I think this has been a really interesting experiment, because I don't think it makes any difference.
No, I think so too, because in the beginning of lockdown, I think everybody in the scene, retailers and of course independent bottlers and the big players, I think everybody was scared what will happen with the scene, but then after 2-3 weeks, everything went back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that there's still a huge appetite for whiskey. So people are still buying whiskey. The festivals are like, it's a little bit like, you know, if you like I'm going to show my age here incidentally, because I still buy compact discs, and vinyl, sometimes vinyl records, but I'm not a big MP3 person.
I'm a big vinyl fan, so that part is okay by me.
So it's kind of, I always think it's like, when you buy the bottle of whiskey to drink at home, it's like buying the CD or the vinyl record. But when you go to the whiskey festival, it's like going to the live concert. So the two things.
Yeah.
Yeah, the two. It's an experience. I mean, I love. Even if I'm not an exhibitor, I like to go to a whiskey festival or a beer festival. It's great fun. So I think, although it might not necessarily be important for sales, I think the whiskey companies are still going to want to do it because it helps with the brand awareness and all that stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. Alistair, one more question. Where do you want to be within 10 years due to your company, of course?
So this is so difficult because my dad is constantly saying, so when are you coming to Glenallachie? When are you coming to Glenallachie? Because, you know, my dad's pretty healthy, but he's in the latter part of his 70s, and he's kind of thinking about what's going to happen further down. So I would love to develop this business and keep this business going forever. But I wouldn't rule out the fact that at some point I may be doing this, but also maybe have some involvement with because it's a family business. So I can't. My dad says you can't run away forever.
You're free now, but you have to come back. Can imagine. So just for the viewers, next week we have another guest, and I don't know if you know the guy, but he's great. Alex Kong from Worthy Park Estate. Something completely different, of course. It's about rum, Jamaican style rum. Lovely guy, and he's talking about Worthy Park and rum and Jamaican rum especially. So to the viewers, I hope you will join us next week. Alex. Alistair, thank you very much for joining us this evening. You mentioned it before. It's Monday evening. It's a strange night for doing this. So we always stop the show and we give the last word to our viewers. So I will go to the back and I'll talk to you later on after the show. So you have the last word and you can say whatever you want to the viewers. If you want to shout out to them, please go ahead. I don't mind. But thank you very much to the viewers. I hope to see you next week. And goodbye from me. Bye.
And goodbye from me too, guys. I just want to say thanks to everybody for giving up your time on a Monday night when you could be watching Coronation Street. So I appreciate it, and I hope you're all having a dram and Slange. Cheers.